Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Eric Fein. I will be the moderator for this webinar on the waste transportation through intermodal services. We are waiting here for the last here person, I think, to join. So far we are here 68. We have 5 speakers. So let's wait 1 minute and then we can really start the webinar. Remy, can you maybe share the presentation for the CT for you? Thanks a lot. Yeah.
There it is.
So for your information, so this video will be, or this webinar will be recorded. That's a way also then to promote and disseminate our activities through social media. So the video will also be then available for anyone for colleagues that couldn't attend this webinar. So that will be also then available after the event. Yeah. And if somebody disagree, I think, on that, so please, I think, use the chat. So the chat is open to everyone. So don't hesitate, I think, to put your questions. Or directly, I think, to a speaker. So we have here 3 speakers. I will come back to the agenda. If you have general question, that's also possible. Don't hesitate to use the chat. So Remy and myself, so Remy, my colleague of UIR, will also be then there to answer direct question. I think if he can say, if this is not the case, then he will then, I think, come and ask then directly the question to the different speakers. Yeah. Okay, so we are 73 with far, so we are nearly 80 people. So I propose to start. So can you go to the next slide, please, Remy? Okay, so I will start with some introductive words. So this webinar is organized under the umbrella of the so-called CT4U campaign. I will come back to that. So we have 3 keynote speakers today. So we are pleased to welcome Mr. Jörg Arz from the DG Environment. He will explain, I think, what is the waste regulation about. We have then 1 key operator, so Fabio Contrafatto from the company Hupac. So we will explain, I think, the importance of the waste transport for their operation. And I'm really pleased to have here Aiza on board, I think, as a legal and policy officer of the European Waste Management Association, that will also then somehow present, I think, the position of the association regarding the waste shipments and the new waste shipment regulation. There will be then closing remarks that will be also then supported with a Q&A session. So depending, I think, if we are going through all the questions during, I think, the presentation, but there will be a session, I think, that is focusing on the questions, I think, that we can address, I think, to the different speakers. Okay, next slide, please, Remy. CT4U. So that's a campaign that is coordinated by UIR. I will come back to UIR's role and mission. So the background, we have launched a first version of this campaign some years ago. The idea was to show to the policy decision makers, to the stakeholders of intermodal transport, the benefits of door-to-door combined transport for the European freight logistics. It was quite successful, so that's why we have decided to continue with the CT4U 2.0. So the aim of the Commission and the parliaments have slightly changed. So we are coming from the Green Deal. Now we are going to the Green Industrial Deal. So we are speaking about competitiveness of the European economy. We are speaking about resilience. And we strongly believe the combined transport can offer, I think, is efficiencies and also is resilience, I think, to comply with the new, I think, values and the new, I think, targets of the Commission. So here in that case, we have launched the CT4U campaign since October. So of course, for everyone that would like to support this campaign, don't hesitate to come back to us. We need your support. We need to share best practices. We need to share your experience, I think, in using intermodal freight transport services, and certainly I think towards the policy making. It's very important, I think, that we continue this activity in the next years, as a lot of, I think, political dossiers are still on the table. We are speaking about the intermodal directive. We are speaking about the weights and dimension directive. We are speaking about the capacity regulation in the railway transport. So there are a lot of dossiers that are still on the table that needs, I think, a continuous, I think, promotion and a continuous explanation, I think, to those that are going to decide on the next, 15 or 20 years of railway in the future, and especially the combination road rail. Next slide, please. Speaking about efficiencies, so for your information, if you are interested, I think, in intermodal freight transport and about efficiencies and resilience, so we have performed a study on the efficiencies, and I put here the link, I think, on the study that you can download. It's completely free of charge. So we are speaking about the environmental, of course, and climate efficiency. We are speaking also infrastructure efficiency. We are speaking about safety, which is certainly something very important in the circular economy, and certainly also then for the waste transport. We are speaking also about labor productivity, the work-life balance, and not the least is about the energy and the critical aspect of saving energy if we transport goods and especially waste, for example, on rail. So it's a very clear, I think, evidence that we are saving a lot of energy and also CO2 if you transport those loading units and goods on by using intermodal freight transport based on railway. As I told you, next slide, please, Remy. Okay, then shortly, I think, about UIR, there was some missing. So we are representing the intermodal operators. We are that's the slide. So thanks you. We are the voice of Intermodal Transport Europe. So we are representing, that's in the middle of the screen, so the combined transport operator. So that's the entities that are organizing the intermodal transport services, mainly between two terminals. It can be also door to door. You have on the right, I think, the second candidate for membership is the terminal. So that's the interface between the transport modes, so mainly between road and rail. But we have also on board, I think, members that are offering trimodal solution, also then including inland waterway. That's our galaxy. So we have partners. We have concluded with national association that are also active in combined transport, some MOUs, and then you have at the bottom, I think, our main targets, so the government bodies with the parliament, the council, and the commission, and on the left is all the association with whom we are working, and for example, to develop a common position paper or common press release, I think, on some specific point here. Okay, now I will invite, after my introduction, I think the first speaker. The webinar is on waste, and we thought it would be great, I think, that the Commission will here present, I think, the new regulation on shipment of waste and the consequence, I think, for the different stakeholders. So the floor is now to Jörg Hartz, which is the policy officer in the Unit B3 in the DG Environment. So Jörg, the floor is yours, and many thanks for your presentation. So I will ask then now Remy. I think that's the presentation already, Remy?
Yeah, that's Jörg's presentation, yeah.
Okay, so I will then somehow turn off my camera, and then the floor is yours. Yeah, Jörg, thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for inviting me. I hope you can understand me well.
Very well, yeah.
Okay, because unfortunately my headphones are lost for the moment, so I have to do it without, but happy you can hear me. Yes, indeed. I intend to very briefly present the new waste shipment regulations. So a regulation on EU level that was adopted last year, and that will replace the current rules on the shipment of waste. I will go through all of the elements that are in there. but I will try to focus on what seems, at least to me, most relevant for the participants today. And please, afterwards, do not hesitate to come back with questions, of course. Can you give the next slide, please? So just as an overview, from the Commission side, we made an evaluation of the waste shipment rules already 2020, 2021. And we initially proposed from our side a new regulation in November 2021. And with that, there was a communication. I've included the hyperlinks in this slide. If you would be interested to read into this communication, because that frames the whole this new regulation frames it more in an international context and also in a broader policy context. So the title is "Our Waste, Our Responsibility," and that is really a line that goes through all the proposals that we made and also how it resulted in the new regulation. That was politically agreed already end of 2023, but then the formal adoption took some time, and that arrived end of April last year. So also you can see the link where you can look into the text itself. Next slide. Just as a matter of some background and also put it in a more international context. So over the last 2 decades, what we've seen is that the EU is an important importer of waste. We have waste management capacity in the EU that is high end, that is high quality. So a lot of waste is being imported for treatment in the EU. At the same time, we see while the import has remained more or less stable over the last 2 decades, we've started to export more and more waste from the EU to countries around the globe. As you may know, since long the EU has prohibited the export of hazardous waste. So what we are now looking at is mainly non-hazardous waste, so the waste that should not cause too much problems. I think of plastic waste, I think of textile waste, metal waste, both ferrous and non-ferrous scrap. But what we've also seen, and if you can go to the next slide. So these are the top destinations. So Turkey is by far the largest importer of EU waste at the moment. But you can also see a number of countries that are not a member to OECD. That's a typical distinction we make, stemming from the fact that in OECD there are more advanced rules on waste management, but also waste transport, waste movement. Turkey being in the OECD, it's the largest importing destination, but there are also countries like India, Vietnam, Pakistan, Egypt that are not OECD and that are in development, that are developing or having economies in transition. And unfortunately, in many of such countries, waste is not always managed in the right manner. So that's one of the focuses we took in revising the current waste shipment rules, to take greater responsibility for, in case waste from the EU is shipped to such destinations, that we want to be ensured that the waste is managed properly at destination. At the same time, that also requires that in the EU, we carefully look into that waste arrives in a destination where it gets recycled and it arrives there in an easy manner, not overly burdened by any administrative procedures. Next slide. Yeah, I think I've mentioned a number of these waste streams. So iron and steel, also because of the weight, is by far the largest waste stream exported, but also paper and cardboard waste is really one of the main exported waste streams. Just to point out, there's also plastics, including rubber, and I will come back to plastics because the co-legislators have taken a specific decision on this type of waste. Next slide. So the main objective of this regulation has been since long, and also with the renewed regulation, this is still the main focus. The main objective is to ensure protection of the environment and the public health, in relation to the shipment of waste and the treatment at destination. At the same time, it also implements the EU's commitments on the global level. So there is a convention under the umbrella of the United Nations, the so-called Basel Convention, which introduced already in the 90s, last century, rules on the movement across borders of hazardous and some other types of waste. The EU has implemented since the 90s this convention and has more detailed rules, including on the shipment of non-hazardous waste, with a view to control the movement of this waste and to ensure that it is well monitored and arrives at a destination where it can be treated properly. With this renewed regulation, we've taken into account, still it's very important to control the movement of waste, but at the same time, there is much more attention for circular economy, the use of waste as a valuable resource. So this regulation, which before was mainly focusing on control procedures, what we've now have with this new regulation is a more balanced approach, still ensuring the control of the movement of waste, but providing for a number of tools that facilitate that shipment in case it goes to recycling, other recovery operations of the waste. So to really ensure that this instrument is also incorporated in the whole toolbox to transition to a circular economy. The regulation not only, if you can stay in the previous slide for a moment, so it not only regulates the shipment between member states, but also the import and export of all types of waste, except for a number of very specific waste types, so like nuclear waste, wastewater, that animal byproducts. Those are the types of very specific types of waste that are not covered by this regulation. Yes, next slide, please. So 3 main objectives. First, I already referred to the extra EU dimension, so to ensure that waste that is exported arrives at a destination where it is managed in an environmentally sound manner. Equally, or maybe even more important, is to facilitate shipments of waste in the EU, to make sure that they are controlled properly, but at the same time encourage shipments for recycling. I will come back in the next slide on more concrete measures that have been proposed and have been adopted since. And then a third very important element is you can set up whatever rules you think are needed, but it's very important to make sure they are enforced. So while the previous regulation had some provisions on the planning of inspections, for instance, for member states to introduce deterrent penalties in case of infringements, we now have a very elaborate section in the new regulation that provides much stronger measures and tools to ensure that illegal shipments are detected in time and are even prevented. I will also come back to that in a later slide. Next slide, please. So the first objective was to facilitate shipments of waste to re-enter the waste in the circular economy in the EU. And one of the cornerstones of this new regulation, I think this is also quite relevant for the participants today, is the digitalization of procedures. So since long, this has been a paper procedure. So you have to fill in papers physically, send them to authorities. They have to make copies of those papers and send them on to the other involved authorities, and then look into, scrutinize all of these documents and make a decision again on paper. Of course, in this era where we have all the digital tools at hand, the decision was taken to really shift from a paper-based approach to a digital handling of procedures, which will ensure that these procedures are handled much more efficiently, much more smoothly, much more transparently. So what we are at the moment working on in the Commission intensively together with authorities in member states is to set up this whole system of digital procedures. By May 2026, it will become mandatory exchange all the documents, all the information electronically and no longer on paper. With this digitalization of procedures, there will also be an obligation for the Commission to publish a number of data based on the database that will be built by using the digital procedures, and that will improve the transparency on the shipments of waste. This is very basic information. If you are interested, you can look into Annex 12 of the new regulation, which outlines exactly what has to be published by the Commission regularly. That is basically the ongoing shipments, the origin and the destination, and what type of waste is concerned. So it's not as if there are many detailed data exposed. It's just to provide an overview and basic form of transparency. A number of other measures that have been taken is to prohibit, in principle, shipments disposal. So, for instance, shipments of waste going to a landfill. Of course, there will still be cases where waste has no other solution than being landfilled or being incinerated. And if those cases are well demonstrated, that will still be possible. But as a principle, we really want to focus waste moving to recycling or any other form of recovery. Again, to facilitate shipments to recycling, there is a regime, it's often referred to as a fast-track procedure, where you can get a consent much sooner. It takes less time to have all your documents processed by the authorities. And you can also get a consent instead of 1 year to ship waste for 1 year. You can get a consent for up to 3 years. That's a procedure that already existed, but it was not used to the maximum. The new regulation details much more provides much more detail on the conditions how to pre-consent such facilities. In case you ship waste to such a pre-consent facility, you can benefit from these fast-track procedures. And by detailing the procedure or the process of pre-consenting such facilities, the mutual recognition of these facilities by member states will increase significantly. So again, that's a tool, a measure to facilitate shipments to recycling. And then finally, we have as Commission an empowerment, the mandate to detail or to issue detailed rules, detailed criteria on how to classify waste much more clearly, because a lot of the delays today in waste shipments stem from discussions between authorities or between authorities and those that want to ship waste on whether the waste is actually hazardous or not, whether it is classified under one or the other code. And depending on how you classify waste, you will have to follow one or the other more or less stringent procedure. So by better harmonizing the classification of waste, again, we will streamline how procedures are required and how they are handled. Next slide, please. So on the second objective, on the export of waste and to ensure that waste arrives in destinations that are that we can be reassured they handle the waste properly. Again, this distinction between OECD, non-OECD countries. So to OECD countries, while we do see that there is more control in the OECD area because of the fact there are more detailed rules at OECD level, still we want to be sure that if there are issues arising with a certain destination in the OECD area, we as Commission we are monitoring the exports of waste to such destinations with a view to detect in time if there are problems that we can intervene and enter into a dialogue with those countries to see how this can be solved, or in the end we could even restrict exports to such countries. Then on the end of non-OECD countries, and that's an exercise we are in the middle of today even, non-OECD countries had to come back before the 21st of February this year, so 2 weeks ago, applying for being included in a list of countries where after 21st May 2027, when all of these rules will enter into application, where the export of EU waste will still be allowed to. So they have to come back first explicitly indicating they are willing to receive certain waste, and they have to specify this in the application. But more importantly, to provide information and evidence that they are ready and they are able to manage this waste in a proper manner. So they have the infrastructure in place, they have legislation in place, they enforce this legislation. So a number of elements that we want to look into, and we are now starting to look into, with a view to establish such a list by mid-2026. And then overall, and there is a reference to a register of audited facilities, and this relates to an overall obligation, whatever the destination outside the EU is, if it is allowed to export waste to this given country, the company that exports the waste from the EU will be obliged to ensure that the destination country is audited by an independent third party. So the first set of rules, so what I explained on the OECD, non-OECD country level, that's on a country level. So we will assess whether a country is ready to still properly manage waste that is being exported from the EU to that country. A second layer of insurance is the company level, so also on the facility level where the waste is actually treated. Such an audit will again provide an additional tool for authorities to look into whether the waste is actually being treated in the end as it should be treated. Next slide, please. Then I already referred to the specific additional rules that were adopted on plastic waste. So plastic waste, since a few years, has become clear that this is a particularly challenging waste stream. It's not necessarily hazardous, but the way it is managed and mismanaged at the moment globally, and all the global effects that we are experiencing, beaches being contaminated, oceans being flooded with plastics and microplastics, this requires a specific attention to this type of waste. The Basel Convention that I referred to earlier already took measures to more stringently include plastic waste under the controls of this convention. And the co-legislators have decided also in the new waste shipment regulation to pay specific attention to this type of waste. So there will be an overall ban without any exemption of all plastic waste to non-OECD countries from November 2026. Only after 21st of May 2029, so in the future, if countries still think they again want to import plastic waste from the EU, they can apply for that at that time and demonstrate to the EU that they are really ready to import such and manage such waste. Before that, there will be an overall ban of that type of waste. The export of plastic waste to OECD countries, we will review the management of such waste in OECD countries. And again, Turkey is by far the largest destination at the moment, to see if there are also issues there, and if that is the case, how we can address them properly. So there's no restriction or ban towards OECD countries, but there is a closer monitoring also for plastic waste. And overall, there is this reference to the notification procedure. Again, I think that is relevant because that is the procedure that requires a number of documents first to be submitted in order to receive a consent to start shipping the waste. But while shipping the waste, you need to produce also movement documents and have the transport accompanied by those documents. So this procedure will apply for all authorized exports of plastic waste from May 2026, including for those plastic wastes that are today so-called green listed, which means you don't have to apply all of these prior notification and consent procedures. Next slide, please. I'm not going to the details of this slide. It's just to give you an overview of all the timelines, because that is a bit complicated when all of these new measures start to apply. I understand the presentation will be available to you, so it's for you to look into more after the meeting. Next slide. I already referred to the stronger response that we incorporated in the new regulation as regards enforcement. So 3 main elements, I think. So first, to focus better on the level of coordination and cooperation between member state competent authorities and inspection authorities. So one concrete element there is that we've established a EU-level waste shipment enforcement group, exactly gathering all the enforcement colleagues, those that are working on the ground to enforce the rules, and to see whether and how to increase the cooperation, but also to coordinate actions better to make the whole enforcement more efficient. With that, there are strengthened provisions on inspection planning, on penalties. That is building on the current or the previous regulation. And then one very specific novelty is a role for the Commission to also step in and support member state inspection authorities in performing inspections and investigations. It will be the EU Anti-Fraud Office, so OLAF, that is already today active in looking into waste crime cases that involve third countries, but they will in the future more comprehensively be mandated to support member states also within the borders of the EU. Next slide, please. So one slide just to sum up. I refer to a number of work streams that are ongoing at the moment. So we are now implementing the new regulation. It has been in force since April 2024, but the dates of application when actual detailed rules will start to apply are in the near future. A very important date I already mentioned is the 21st May 2026, when most of the provisions will enter into application, including the mandatory digital exchange of documents and procedures. So that's one element we are working on at the moment, to establish the specifications, the technical requirements in order to make the central system operated by the Commission, which we are also developing, to interoperate this system with some of the local systems in member states. So some member states already have developed and are developing their own systems, and we want to make sure that all of that interoperates smoothly. So as a user, you just use the system, and how that interoperates, that should not be the concern of the user, but also on the end of carriers, on transport companies that will have the role, of course, to physically transport all of this waste. One regulation that is probably very familiar to you is the FT regulation, where there are also developments to ensure the electronic exchange of documentation under that regulation. That's also something we are working with our colleagues in DG Move very closely to ensure the interoperation of FT platforms, FT gateways with the new waste shipment system. So also for the idea is that a carrier logs into the system that he or she is used to log into, but can also retrieve the necessary data for waste shipments if that is an activity he or she is active in. And then one other element that I already mentioned is the work to establish the list of countries in non-OECD area. By 21st May 2027, these new export rules will start to apply. So only those countries that are on that list, the export will still be allowed, and the list has to be established by November 2026. So that's we are now starting to look into the applications by the countries that have already come back to us. You can go to our website. I think in the end of the presentation there is a QR code which you can scan, and you arrive in our website on waste shipments. And there you can find more information on what countries have applied and for what. And then plastic waste, I think I've explained this. There is a specific regime entering into force also from 2026. And I think that was my last slide. Yes.
And the QR code is there indeed. Then. Okay, yeah, many thanks. I think for I think more details. I think on the waste regulation. I think it will help a lot. I think the audience. I think to understand. I think the new measures. And you have a lot of applause and finger up. So many thanks. I think for your presentation. I've seen there was some questions in the chat. Wait, I'm just looking, I think, because it's coming from the CIT. So from Guillaume Murawa, you have replied, I think, on the implementing act that will come in May 2025. But he raised a question about the maybe public consultation that you are going to launch in March concerning the digital procedure. Can you tell us a bit more, I think, about that?
Yes, sure. We are actually in the middle of the process of launching that public feedback period. So 4 weeks period where we will share the draft implementing act for all to look into and come back. It should be launched today or tomorrow at the latest. So that's happening as we speak. Yes.
Okay. You have just to push the button. Okay.
I wish it was so easy, but no. Yeah.
No, I know. Okay,
yeah.
because we have been participating to a number of public consultation. Yeah. Okay. I have a second question. I think from Mr. Luc. I think from the company Combiverkehr. So that's an operator. So the question is, when the digital system starts, will it only be in use for new notification, also for old ones which are already running in May 2026?
Yeah, indeed. The waste shipment regulation provides for transitional rules exactly also to regulate these cases where files or notifications have been submitted on paper. What we have laid down is that if the competent authority has acknowledged the receipt of the paper dossier, it will be handled in the old procedure.
Mm-hmm.
If not, it would have to be resubmitted in the electronic system. But of course, submission in an electronic system requires less effort, so to say. It's much more straightforward, and it would also ensure, that's at least what we strongly believe, it would ensure a smoother handling of the whole file. So, but there are rules on the transitional period, and it basically links, or it is linked with the acknowledgement of receipt of the papers. Then it would still be handled as it used to be. If you wait a few days, in practice that will come down to this, and submit it in the electronic system, it will be handled electronically.
Really? Okay, I think that replies quite clear. I think the question of Mr. Luc. I don't see any question, but I have two additional ones. Do you have statistics and figures, I think, on the waste transport per transport mode? So to understand, I think, how many waste or tons are transported by road, rail, or inland waterway, for example. Do you have such figures? This is then also then compiled by Eurostat, or for the moment you don't have any idea?
At the moment, it's quite difficult. It's complicated to gather such statistics, exactly because we have a paper approach. We have repeatedly or regularly consulted the member state competent authorities because they could have such data, and I say could because in some cases they already digitalized some of the paperwork, in other cases not. So if there are statistics, they are not comprehensive. They are not complete. This is one of the main advantages of the new system, the new digital system. We will have all of these data more readily available because that will exactly be in the system. At the moment, that's not always clear, no, which we regret, but that's how it is today.
We know the situation with statistics and certainly also in intermodal transport. I have maybe a last question, and then we have to go, and I think, to the next speaker. Is about the paper to digitalization. I think also in the chat some very positive, I think, evolution, I think, on that. You have put this in your presentation, but are we meaning here a data data element that you have defined that you have to put to the system, or you are speaking about a PDF file that you have to upload into the system? So that's just to understand if we are really going to full digitalization, so EDI exchange, or you have to produce something on your laptop and then you have to upload those documents into this digital system.
No, the idea is that the notification and movement document, so that is more precisely annexes 1A and 1B, but also Annex 7 documents. Those of you that are familiar with waste movements know Annex 7 is for the green listed, so non-hazardous waste. All of that will be structural information that you have to submit in the system. And we will be able to work with that also. And that's why I referred also to the more the possibilities that we will gain also for drawing statistics, because one of the elements in those documents is a box where you have to specify the mode of transport. So that will be structured information or data in the system.
Okay.
Of course, there will be the possibility to upload attachments, and that might be a contract where you have to scan the signed contract, and that will be a PDF. But the data that are required in the documents will be structured.
Okay. Yes. That's really a step further. Yeah. I will take the last question, I think, then really from the audience directly. So I have here Joost. I will allow you, I think, to raise the questions then directly. So I open now the microphone. So Joost Overdaking, sorry for the pronunciation, but I allow the microphone and then you can raise your question. For the moment you are muted, but you can raise your question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Joost Overdaking from the UIC, International Union of Railways. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I have three short questions, and if there's no time to answer them here, you can also send them to us by email. But I was wondering whether you will also digitalize or enforce the digitalization of the PIC procedure from the Basel Convention. That's question one. Question two is whether the announced harmonization of the classification of waste, whether it is hazardous or not, it's a very good idea, whether that will be done in concert with the members of the Basel Convention, the signatories of the Basel Convention, and that classification that is in there. And the third question is whether, that's more out of curiosity, the point you made about the export to non-OECD countries, and that it will only be allowed if they have notified to the Commission their willingness to import EU waste. Is that because that's already covered by the Basel Convention PIC procedure, right? Or is it the EU that takes over that procedure, the notification of import agreement? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for those questions. Yeah, first the relationship with the Basel Convention more generally. Indeed, you refer to the PIC procedure, the prior informed consent procedure, which in the EU we have implemented this in the prior notification and consent procedure. So that is the PIC procedure. In the EU, it has since long been somewhat more detailed. While in the Basel Convention, it just puts forward the principle of you have to notify the fact that you intend to ship waste to the involved authorities, and they have to provide their decision. What we have in the EU is and that's not new, that's since longer. There are some timelines attached to this. With the digitalization, those timelines will become even clearer. The date that you submit in the system for the EU will be the acknowledgement of receipt. While today, on paper, of course, you can imagine when the papers arrive by post, that's the day when an authority may acknowledge the receipt, and that again takes some time. So all of those unclarities in the timelines will be clarified because of the digitalization, but we will. So the notification procedure, when I refer to the notification procedure, this is actually the PIC procedure under Basel. We are focusing on intra-EU shipments, so between member states, but we will allow for third country actors to also connect to our system directly, or if they have their own system, we will look into how we can interoperate those two systems. Because in the longer term, it's also to the benefit of the EU that we smoothen the trade in waste, so to say, with such third countries. Linking then to your last question, the regime that we've now introduced, this is really an EU regime. It's not exactly implementing the Basel Convention. The Basel Convention is on hazardous waste and some specific other types of waste, like mixed household waste, plastic waste. But for instance, metal scrap is not covered by the controls of the Basel Convention. That is green listed waste, it's referred to. In the EU, we have since long our Annex 7, so a very light procedure just to have documentation with the transport. That will also be digitalized now. And it's for that type of waste where we also want to be sure that we only export that waste to countries that are up to the task, so that are able, willing and able to manage it. For hazardous waste and the Basel waste, so to say, nothing changes. We still prohibit that the export to non-OECD countries. And then finally, on the harmonization of classification of waste, we will not divert from the classification of waste as in Basel. So the list of hazardous waste in Basel, we fully implemented this. It is more issues like you have a mix of mainly paper waste, but there is some plastic in there. Today, it's not harmonized where are the thresholds for contamination, for instance? What are the criteria that one competent authority applies, and that is a bit different than what another competent authority applies. So that we would like to look into, or be able to look into, and harmonize that. So that is not contradicting or diverting from what Basel considers it. It's really to specifically clarify a number of issues, and mainly for the waste that is not covered by the Basel Convention. So I hope that clarifies your question.
I'm not so sure that he can reply.
Sorry. Yes. No. Yeah. Very clear. Very clear. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. That will be really the final question, and many thanks, I think, for Jörg and also the question from the audience. So we will then move now to an intermodal operator that transport waste. So I will invite now Fabio, I think, to intervene now. Okay, that was also my second question, to ask Remy, I think, to open the presentation. So Fabio, the floor is now yours, I think, to explain, I think, the waste transport with the perspective of an intermodal operator. Fabio.
Thank you very much, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. We heard very good news before. I hope I can explain a little bit in details our operational situation. I will say, next slide, please. We introduced a little bit the differences between the intermodal sector, intermodal transport. That means many actors that are acting and are involved during waste transport. You can see below a little bit an easy example of the intermodal sectors compared to the road. So in this case, we have at least 3 railways undertaking, 2 terminal, waste producer, disposal center, many actors that are now managing hard copies. This means normally from Italy, especially hazardous waste, which we can see later on. But in any case, the difference between the opportunity to manage in a digital way compared to the hard copies is that we have a higher chance of loss of documents with many negative impact. And maybe next slide, please. I will explain you. So we started from a waste. What does it mean? Okay, I'm not going into detail, but in any case, we have a notification, or we could have a green listed. Then it can happen that with a notification, we have dangerous, hazardous waste or not hazardous waste that could also be included in the RAD, we could say dangerous goods mode for rail and road. And we have also to consider in this method of transport two different methods, also two different regulation and different approach. In any case, by the railways undertaking, we are covering both modes and we in terminal, and we are using and apply in the right way both regulation and both methods. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary to underline or point out that in the last years, we had a growth of transport of hazardous waste, more or less 7 till 10% per year. And also important, there was a shift from hazardous waste towards not hazardous waste. This means in the last year, we had more hazardous waste with notification, with movement document, with involvement of authorities and so on. Then there is additional complexity and administration to cover, but is now what is happened. And in our case, more or less 95% of the hazardous waste and notification are loaded from South Italy or North Italy and sent out towards internally EU or Germany, Belgium, Holland, and so on. This means that we have more or less 40,000 intermodal transport units per year, and we have to consider that also in addition with the previous slide. Next slide, please. So I would say we try to summarize the different mode of transport or different units that we are using right now. In case of liquid, we could say we use tank container. In case of solid, the most used ethos is now the open top container. I have a slide later on that show a little bit more. And in some case also semi-trailer container, but I would say most of the transport of solid are now in open top container with something that we have to consider also about safety of tarpaulin, of possible methods to prevent leaking and so on. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of the different methods that our customers are using or implementing to avoid leaking. So this means it's also important to consider that it's different to transport some other green waste, waste or other goods, because we have to prevent and to be carefully also during the loading of the waste, and pay attention, for example, about gaskets. This must be really checked before, or apply a liner inside the unit to avoid leaking, to contain some absorbent, and be careful also during this kind of activity to avoid damages. In some case, we have some leaking and we have to act carefully, and this is something that we try to explain also in our terminals and that are known by customer, notifier, and waste producer. But it's something that it's today the most important aspect to be considered during the transport about safety, because it's the methods that is mostly used in open top. And you have additionally also something like open above the tarpaulin and gaskets, and so bolting sequence to consider during the loading. These are all methods, we could say, according to our experience in the last year, to reduce and avoid some leaking. Next slide, please. The current situation, starting from Italy, these are just is some example of countries that are involved in our network. There are more, but in any case, what is clear now is, according to the regulation, we can say later on, there is a slide, it's also possible to use some digital solution, and there are countries that are already using it since many years, but you need the confirmation from the authorities, and due to the fact that our traffic is most from South and North Italy, and is not accepted at the moment, then we have to consider our copies, and we have to consider also that there are many approach also to check documents. So we could say the slide, the previous, the current situation of the countries and paper and digital, it's something that we have to take in consideration. I would also point out, and this is also something that we will try to discuss in the next month, also with authorities and our partners, our railway, also partners like railways undertaking and customers. There are also in the current situation where we are using the regulation 1013, there are different approach to accept a transport. This means there are railways undertaking that are asking us notification that they check in depth and maybe ask for additional controls, information, reply that is not there is not a green light about the transport, that we need to involve again notifier, customer authority, and so on, and other railways undertaking also in the same country that are telling us, please don't send us the notification because it's not our task to control the notification. We have some duty that it's clear in the regulation and also applicable. This is also different, and we have also to consider that if we are speaking about international traffics and many countries involved, then there are again also other approach, also maybe due to the culture, due to the attention by the authority, local authorities, and so on. But it's something that is clear to consider that we must try to get attractive or be attractive in the intermodal sector. We should find at least standard level of control and try to be and harmonize this kind of control. Then in the next maybe weeks and months, it's also possible to understand which kind of control are really needed and which kind of control must be done, because it's also important to control. We don't ask to avoid control. It's just important also for us, but to be to try to find standard procedure and inform all actors to act together. The difference, for sure, the big issues is managing hard copies means you can see some picture in our sector that maybe you don't have the next railways undertaking that is awaiting the train due to I don't know, delays, due to infra works. This means some time you could have a train that is stopped in Basel and you don't have the next railways undertaking. Then the document that are in a plastic cover must be put in a wagon or managed in some ways, but it's not easy to have because you have a lot of lost document, you have a lot of difficulties then to guarantee that the transport is done correctly. In any case, we have some proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, we can say later on maybe just something about the document. I think is known, but I will say also the current situation or document that are available according to the regulation are not prepared, are not considered for intermodal sector or railways undertaking, because we have more than 3 carriers, and we had to create some additional document, not official, to have a traceability of all carrier or of all actor involved. And this is something also that must be considered, and for sure with the digitalization and the new solution we can find and avoid this problem. But we had to create in this sector and in this kind of traffic an additional document to official document just to be compliant with the regulation. Next slide, please. This is what I mentioned before. In the current regulation, it was also already possible to manage with digital signature or find digital solution, but all authority had to be or had to agree and be involved. In our case, when you have many authorities in different countries, it was not easy, and due to the fact that we had to transport our waste from Italy, we didn't have some other solution than use the hard copies. Then I also checked in the past, and I know in different countries is already in place since many years, but this is unfortunately is our current situation. Next slide, please. This will be just a picture of the next major infra works in the line. In the railway sector, you know there are many open infra works in many countries. This is also important to enlarge, to increase the weight of the train, to increase the parameter of the train, and be sure that we can be attractive. But we have also to consider that in this case, according to the regulation, we have more difficulty because we have to inform previously the authority about all cross-border, all the routing, and waiting maybe some feedback from authorities. But you know there are many different approach, and sometimes also in the regulation 13 days that you have to wait is not easy, and we will present some proposal in the meantime until the new regulation will be put in place correctly. Next slide, please. So this is the I can say the current situation, waiting for the new regulation, and we have to manage hard copies, handling document in the terminals, and we would try to find at least in the meantime a solution maybe to put the original documents that can be signed by the first carrier, maybe road or something like that, in the docu box of the unit, and try to find solution with the previous document that I showed you, that is for intermodal sector, and can in any case guarantee the traceability of the unit, because otherwise, due to the fact that we have to manage in each or exchange document and over document between each actors, between each railways undertaking, we have a lot of loss. Then one proposal could be, in the meantime, to accept that, for example, it is something that I propose that we have to discuss with authorities and with our partner in the sector, but avoid and sign maybe the document, the movement document, and put them in the docu box, and then try to guarantee the traceability with the intermodal documents, let me say. The second proposal, and to solve some problem, we have more or less 1,000, 1,500 lost documents, and this means there is a procedure that was agreed with Italian authorities. We had to ask to the police department an official loss report, but the current state official loss report means sometimes we have to wait 20 days, 1 month, more than 1 month, because it's also not so clear by each policy in each country that they have to state or send us an official loss report. This means a proposal could be, in the meantime, accept an auto declaration from railways undertaking, for example, to guarantee that the unit can go on with the transport and avoid at least go on with a copies of the original documents, and try to continue and ask later on, if necessary, something with the official loss report. So this is like we could say an auto declaration, but it's clear must be accepted by the authorities. There is also something that is not easy for our customers and notification. In the case of lost document, there is a guarantee that is locked, and this means also money for customer and notification and so on, and must be clearly defined how we can find a solution about this case, because you have to point out, or I have to point out, there are customers, for example, also today that are waiting then for more than 1 month in Köln because they have to go on or continue the transport towards Malmö in Sweden, but they are waiting for the lost report, and it's a big issue also because there are costs from the terminal side, there are possible additional environment impact because the unit could start leaking, the waste could start leaking. So this is something that creates additional negative impact. The third solution, or the third proposal about alternative borders, as you saw before, we have many different infraworks in the coming years, and we would like to try to convince the authority to accept in the if the notifier are preparing a notification more than one cross-border, because at the current status there are different approaches. Sometimes there are notificator or client that receive from authorities the confirmation that they can use more and different cross-border. Some customer told me there are, or it's also visible on the document, there is some case where the authority accept different cross-border, but only one as priority, and the second, the third, and different cross-border must be previously mentioned and then communicated. But this means send again the notification, ask to all authorities they have to accept the second, the third cross-border, and maybe stock unit in terminal or blocked unit in terminal, like now. So this is something, if we can be, we will be attractive in the future, we have to consider also the situation of the network, railway situation, and be clear that we need more flexibility, we could say. And the last one, this is also something, as I mentioned before, try to define how we can accept or we can avoid a different interpretation or different railways undertaking. Also the same railways undertaking, but in different countries, have different approach about the accept, control of notification and so on. So this is something that we would like to check in the coming months also with our partners and railways undertaking and try to find a solution. Next slide, please. So this is clearly also the digital solution could solve many problems, also environment friendly aspect, traceability, efficiency, and so on. But we have to consider that we have to work, or consider at least till next year that we have to go on with the current situation, and I will try to find solution in between and proactive also for the sector if possible. Thank you.
Yes, Fabio, thanks a lot. So it's not easy if you summarize the situation for intermodal transports. I think you mentioned several times one member state, so Italy. So it means that a sustainable transport mode like rail, we need, I think, to promote, I think, this transport mode, but we need also then to find the right measures. I think compared to what you put in your first slide to say there is a unimodal truck is very easy. And we have a lot of, I think, interaction and numerous stakeholders, I think, when you are using intermodal transport. So it means that the regulation and also the authorities have to adapt, I think, the procedure according, I think, to the most sustainable solution. I will, maybe there are some questions in the chat for you, Fabio. The first one is about the evolution in your statistics. There was a question if this is not due to the reclassification of weights. So meaning that it might be that some waste products was not considered as hazardous goods and now it's considered. Might be this the reason why in your evolution in the last years you have more hazardous goods with weight, or that's really a true evolution that you have more waste or dangerous goods waste? Yeah.
As we say, there is a growth of the traffic in generally, and maybe some is impacting also from the change of the classification. Okay. But in generally, I would say in the last year we had a growth of the traffic, and the statistic was also to point out that we are facing now many problems compared to the last years, because we have to mention and use original document because it's hazardous waste with notification, loss of document, and so on. But yes, could be also some a part of the answer.
Mm-hmm. So last question, and then we have to move to the last speaker. You are mentioning that different digital system exists already in some member states, but are those digital system dealing with multiple carriers then? Because you said on paper you cannot do it, but on this digital system, is this foreseen that you have multiple carriers?
Also, this is something that we have to discuss with the service provider. I had the opportunity to show some solution in Germany and Holland in the past year. They were prepared to manage multimodal or multi-carrier, but I had to check in detail. We have to be careful and consider that according to the new regulation, then this is part of the next steps. Yes. Exactly.
Okay, so then we have to be careful. I think in the public consultation, in the draft implementing active, this is foreseen. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Fabio. I think for your intervention. So there are some additional questions, but we can raise them afterwards. And thanks, Remy, to put then the presentation of our last speaker. So I'm inviting now Isaiah from the FEID. So that's the European Waste Management Association, to come with their, I think, position on the waste regulation. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm going to explain a bit the position of FEAD, the waste management industry sector, on waste shipment in general, and then come to some points on intermodal shipments as well. In the next slide, just a very short introduction of FEAD. For those that don't know us, we are an association, a European umbrella association, so our members are national associations representing private waste management operators, covering the entire value chain, which means from the collection to sorting, recycling, energy recovery to disposal. And FEAD is already active for over 40 years in Brussels, advocating for a better circular economy in Europe. I wanted to start my presentation in the next slide with what was already said in the introduction, the fact that we now have a clean industrial deal that is going to complement the green industrial deal, the Green Deal, sorry. So we see here this evolution in policy, but we are very, very happy to have in the text very clearly that the circular economy is a priority and a big ambition to make actually the EU world leader in circular economy by 2030. However, we can also see how it is acknowledged that there are some obstacles still, which are summarized here in the absence of scale and a single market for waste and secondary raw materials. And I think this links very well with the topic of my presentation. You can see in the next slide very, very shortly in 4 keywords or key points, FEAD's position when it comes to waste shipment. We have advocated in the process of the revision of the waste shipment regulation for safe but also efficient shipments, because this is very needed for the circular economy, not only in Europe, but at global scale as well. And this need is going to grow with the higher specialization of the industry. If we want to improve recycling, we need to increase the scale. There are going to be big investments needed. And also here, shipments will need to go to the most specialized facility, to the best facility, which is not necessarily the closest in all cases. And if you go to the next slide, you will also see very quickly here, I think you can continue clicking. I didn't remember this feature, but there are still some aspects that are hampering the efforts in improving the circular economy. I think they have mostly been mentioned already by the 2 presentations before, but we are facing procedural delays, high administrative burdens. This increases the cost. You also need to store the waste, which is linked to risk and so on. We are very happy. I think we share in this digital room, everybody the appreciation for shifting to digitalization. This has been a very high priority for FEAD and that we very welcome in the new legislation. But we also see a need of human resources. So we need to make sure that the administration has sufficient personnel that is able to deal with all these notifications and with all these procedures. And we need skills. So the people in the administration, they need to also be sufficiently trained because there are many decisions that need this knowledge. And it was mentioned before also the issues with the interpretation and so on. So this is still needed. We still need to make sure that actually deadlines are complied with, and there are still some things that can be improved, like, for example, the harmonization of the calculation method for the financial guarantees. Another point that was also already mentioned is different interpretations that we are facing, and here the contamination thresholds is a very clear example. So this is something to work on. Illegal waste trade as well. This is a clear distortion of competition. We need to make sure that it's not more attractive to do an illegal shipment than to do a legal one. So we are also very happy with strengthening the enforcement of the rules as it is foreseen, and we hope that this will improve the situation for our members. And of course, one big point here is, and this is also what was mentioned before, we need to find the right balance between ensuring safety, but also having efficient and not hampering circular economy models. That is what is behind these waste shipments. So here we were quite skeptical with this list of countries system that was explained before by Jörg. We are happy that a significant number of countries have applied, and we hope that the applications are going to be okay. As FEAD, we were putting a lot of emphasis from the beginning in the new audit system. This is something we have supported, and we also hope that the implementation of this will work well. It's something that is going to come in the next years, and we need to make sure that we have a strong system that ensures quality auditing of the facility. And this is a bit our position on the waste shipment regulation. But actually, when it comes to waste shipment, we also have to consider the rules on dangerous goods. And this you can see in the next slide. Yeah. So this is something that we have 3 international agreements dealing with dangerous goods transports. We have the ADR, RIT, and also ADN for road transport, rail transport, and inland waterways. And these are rules that were actually originally developed for commercial goods, so not for waste at all. There were actually no waste rules foreseen. While, with the exception of clinical waste, waste is classified as any other dangerous good. So the rules in these international agreements were also applicable for waste transports and are still applicable. So, of course, once these goods become waste, you will never find the same situation. You will never find the same combinations, the same amounts to transport them as it is foreseen for commercial goods. And this is why in FEAD, since 2005, we have been developing very slowly these rules. And this has been done in what is called the joint meeting. This is a body where the authorities that both regulate the rail dangerous goods transport and the road dangerous goods transport come together to decide on rules. And this is necessary, of course, because then these waste rules will be applied to both types of transport. So it's not only about the road, but also rail. And this is done in an ad hoc working group that is called the Informal Working Group on Waste, which is also led by FEAD, and where we are doing this work for many years. It's a slow process, but I think there has been a very good progress. I give you some examples in the next slide of the main things that we have been working on. It started with the classification. It's a very basic situation. The fact that when we talk about waste, we are talking about mixtures from unknown origin and composition in some times. So indeed, the classification rules for dangerous goods were not at all applicable for waste. So now we have specific rules for waste, also specific boxes in the shipping documents and so on that would be applicable for waste. There is also a rule according to which it is allowed in certain cases to estimate quantities. This is still work in progress because it's quite restrictive for the moment. So again, there is a need to find the right balance between ensuring safety and making sure that the rules are usable for the waste sector as well. There was also the need to even introduce a new UN number because the recycling of dangerous goods packaging is an activity that it's growing. It's initial stages, but we already have very good examples out there. However, it was not even foreseen the possibility to transport these empty used packages to be carried for recycling or for disposal even. So this needed to start with a new UN number that was integrated in the agreements. And then there are also some packaging rules that we have worked on and that entered into force actually just now in 2025. So if you think about liquid waste that is in contact with the plastic packaging, there are some chemical compatibility rules that when you do not know the exact composition of the waste mixture, you cannot comply with. So specific rules have been developed for waste there. And the same when we talk about small packagings that go into an outer packaging. Here there are very, very precise rules about the combination, about how you need to place them and so on. This is not possible for waste. Normally you will have a huge variety of small packaging, small labs that are never going to be the same. You cannot wait until one customer has the same of one type of packaging, empty packaging of dangerous goods to recreate the original combination for transport. So also here there are specific rules for waste that entered into force now in 2025. And finally, same also from this year, there are specific provisions to enable the transport of asbestos waste in bulk. And this is a bit general work that has been done not only for waste shipment regulation, but as I said, for dangerous goods purposes. And in the next slide, I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of what has been the feedback from my members. I did a little survey before this webinar to understand what are the concerns, what are the advantages, the challenges, and so on when we talk about intermodal shipments of waste. And maybe to start with, the main principle remains the same. We need efficiency and we need usable rules. For our sector, what has been said to me is that when we talk about intermodal shipment, maybe it's the most efficient when we are talking about big quantities. So in this case, either we have a big client or we have a transfer station from which we can organize the shipment. Although it's, of course, also a very good solution for specific tailor-made projects from very remote locations somehow. So it's quite flexible and it allows for different options. However, there are also some limitations, limited in terms of infrastructure, of course. You need a railway system or you need to have a shipping line available. So this is, of course, the main limitation that we see. It has been already mentioned before, but the fact that the shipment documents are not really adapted to this intermodal shipment is an issue as well. Here, we need to be creative in some cases, and we need to reinterpret the legislation and see how we can fit our exact shipment into this document. Of course, there is also a situation where the flows are not homogeneous. So you have a bigger offer in some parts of the shipment, and then less, and then it can make it very expensive for your stock at some point. This is something that is just linked with more planning than if you do a simple linear shipment with one operator. Then from the members I've asked, I've been told that the most common experience would be water transport in combination with road transport. But of course, there is also significant shipments by rail. It's just that here we are, as I said, limited to the fact that there needs to be the infrastructure in place. An advantage here would be the fact that when you ship by rail, the planning is much easier. You know the schedules, you know the train will be there. While for shipments, water shipments, this is not so easy sometimes. You do not know what ship will be there, and so you have a very limited time to load and to plan everything. These are some of the main, more general comments I've received. And to finalize, I also wanted to share a very concrete experience from Austria. You can see it here on the slide. Actually, Austria is really a front runner when it comes to transports of waste by rail. And this is not only, but also because it is actually mandatory when we talk about certain quantities or a certain distance. And this was already the case, but in the previous government, they reduced the threshold, so the impact was much bigger. It was affecting many more shipments. And this is something that from our industry is welcomed. It's, of course, a very positive measure. They want to ship by rail. It's also, I mean, not only in terms of emissions, but actually there is even a lack of workforces. There is a lack of drivers in the country, so they need alternatives. So the train is a good alternative here. But there was, in this process, a very bad implementation, which actually just led to a huge increase in the prices. And this refers to, since it was mandatory, the prices of the rail transport increased in 20%. But what was most concerning is that when compared to road transport, it was like 50% more expensive. And this really is, it's not competitive here. So the price issue was very important. And the problem was that this legislation was obliging, or is, because it's still in force, it's obliging waste management operators, but it's not obliging the railway operator, and it's not obliging the producer of the waste. So here we have an imbalance in this obligation. And what is also striking and very important to mention is that this does not apply to virgin raw material. So we have again a discrimination when we talk about secondary raw materials in relation to primary raw materials, and this is not good if we want to move towards a circular economy. So this means that in the current framework, it's quite difficult to actually increase the transport by rail. They are now transporting around 3 million tons by rail. They think that with additional efforts, they could increase additional 3 to 5 million tons, but this would be a huge increase in costs. And in the end, it's still below 10% of the total waste treated. So we need to work on the economic viability. This means also scale, so sufficient distances, and also the fact that neighboring countries need to contribute here. And maybe to finish on a positive note, what has been very good to see in this experience, and we also know it from others, from other cases, is how because in these cases, the legislation, of course, also applies in the case of public procurement. So when you have a tender, that would be the same. There is a requirement that the contract is fulfilled via rail transportation. And here this really led to this pull effect where this developed the infrastructure in place. And it has been a positive development. And in this case, the operator was not carrying the cost when we talk when it was a public contract, because it was covered by this. So this is a bit the experience, and of course I'm happy to answer to any question.
So thanks. Sorry, because I was okay. Thanks, Isaiah, for your presentation. So I really appreciate, I think, that you have surveyed your members, I think, concerning intermodal, that you bring the example of Austria. You had the example from the previous speaker on Italy. So we are fully aware about these issues also in Austria. We have it, for your information, that UIR, a working group on dangerous goods and waste. So we have also then make a bit the tour de table, I think, in the different member states. So that was also highlighted that it was a kind of a front runner in Austria, but unfortunately, and I see in the chat indeed that there is one remark that 97% of the requests for waste transport by rail cannot be met by rail carriers, and only 3% can be served by rail. So there is a really huge gap, and I think that's good. I think as an association like yours, I think highlight that because we have to work and really, I think, to work hard. I think to convince your members, I think, to join intermodal transport and not only use inland waterway. We have really to increase that. There is a trend to increase it, but it shouldn't be a niche market for rail. It can be really, I think, an important market like dangerous goods, because dangerous goods, so for our traffic, so our members are transporting more than 20% of their transport are based on dangerous goods, and I think it should be I think also relevant, I think, for waste. Yeah. So many thanks, I think, for your intervention. So we are a bit, I think, here delayed, but we had already a lot of questions. So directly to you, Isaiah, there is no question. There are only some remarks about the situation in Austria, but also this price level. So somebody also mentioned, I think it's not only in Austria that we see some increase in the pricing. It's also for Germany and Netherlands. But okay, that's a more general problem in the railway sector. It's not only related to waste. Okay, so I have to conclude this webinar. So first of all, thanks for the speakers. I think it was very relevant and very, I think, appreciated, I think, to go in the different elements. So the regulation, practical example of an intermodal operator, and also the position of somehow our customers that are using somehow also railway transport for waste. We have recorded the video, so it means that they will be available on our social media. So we are going to put this on our YouTube channel. The presentation that we have now received from all the speakers, so that will be also sent out tomorrow. You will receive then a copy of those presentations, so from the Commission, from the Association, and also from HUPAC. I must say that waste, you have heard this from our operator here, HUPAC, that it's a growing market. It's a good news that we have a new regulation that certainly will solve one or several problems that we have been highlighted by our member company HUPAC as well. But we need this transition period, and this is something that we still, I think, to be careful. You have heard the problems that we have with the railway and the intermodal world. So I beg always, I think, all the actors, I think, to continue the coordination. I think if we want, I think, to have a winning party, because if this is not well implemented, I think also the new waste regulation, I think, also will not be as beneficial as it should be. So let's hope that from of course, when the digital system will be then in place, that it will of course facilitate a common approach. But basically also for those that are interested, I think the public consultation that is announced here in today or tomorrow, I would invite, I think, all the stakeholders, I think, to verify if the specification of this digital platform meets the requirements of intermodal freight transport in Europe. So again, and then the last thank you for all the participants, I think, to this webinar. And I can only ask you, I think, to enjoy the rest of the day, and let's meet together for another webinar in the next months that will also be organized here by UIR in the context of the CTU for a campaign. So many thanks for your participation. Enjoy your day and see you soon. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Asia. Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fabio. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eric.